Let me start with asking you this question. I want to think about it for a second before you answer. What is the greatest title a man can ever hold? Think about it. You might think a doctor, right? Because that's a good one. A doctor spends years studying in school. They live and they save lives, right? You might say maybe a general. Or maybe a judge. Or maybe a pastor, right? Maybe a CEO. You have your big office, you make big decisions. A lot of people depend on you. When we look at all these titles, they're all honorable titles. But today I want to suggest something different. Because the greatest title a man will ever carry is a title of a father. Not because it's the most impressive title on paper. It's like when you look at somebody's resume and all they have is a father, I don't think anybody will hire them, right? But it's because this is the one title that will never retire. Fathers don't clock out at 5 p.m. Fathers don't end their fatherhood when their kids turn 18. Right? And unlike any other title, this title, the work that you put into it is going to have eternal consequences. So today I want us to look at a man who understood that very well. This man was a Roman citizen. He was a brilliant theologian. He was a church planter, and he was a leader of leaders. And of course, I'm talking about Paul. When he wanted to describe the heart behind what he do for God and for his church, for his greatest work, he didn't reach for any of the greatest titles on earth. He reached for fatherhood. So let's read 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 11 and 12. Paul says, "For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God who calls you into his kingdom and glory." 3 words, 3 responsibilities. And I believe as fathers, if we build our fatherhood around these 3 things, we would have carried the greatest title very well. So let's see today, how can we do that? All right? First, a father encourages. That's what fathers do, right? And when you look this word in the Greek language, parakaleo, it literally means to call somebody alongside you. To come close to them and you speak life into their ears. Because encouragement is not just a compliment. Good job. That's not encouragement. Encouragement is breathing courage when somebody is running low. Encouragement is when you say, "I see you, I believe in you, you have what it takes." That is encouragement. Proverbs 18:21 tells us, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." Now that's true for everybody. But in the hands of a father, that is very powerful. Because as a father, your words, your words carry weight that no other person on this earth and in their words will carry. Ephesians 4:6 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." Now, what Paul says here, he says, yes, teach them. But first, do what? Do not provoke them. This is the foundation of this relationship. It's when your child feels safe, when your child feels valued, when your child feels that he is believed in. How many of you know this person? I think it's only Karen and Jose. I think all of us know this person, right? It's a well-known story about this boy named Ben Carson. Have you ever watched the movie Gifted Hands? That was the movie about him. So, growing up in inner city Detroit, Ben was failing at school. His classmates called him the dumbest kid in the class. And for a while, he believed them. By fifth grade, he was at the bottom of his class. He was the worst in every subject. But his mother, Sonia, she refused to let that be the end of his story. She saw something in her son that the grades didn't show. What she did is that she limited TV time. She took him to the library and she made him read 2 books every week and make a report on them. Just go choose whatever 2 books you want to read. Give me a report. You have 1 week. She told him consistently, you have a mind and you are going to use it. That belief spoken over him again and again and again began to change how Ben saw himself. Slowly, the boy that was called the dumbest kid in school became the boy who knew the answers. He went on to become one of the most celebrated neurosurgeons in the world. He was pioneering surgeries that had never been done before. Ben Carson himself said later, everything changed when somebody believed in him before he believed in himself. When we look at his story, unfortunately, it wasn't his father who believed in him. It wasn't his father who encouraged him. It was his mother. But still, the point stands that you can do that to your children. And as fathers, we may never know which moment becomes the moment for your child when everything is going to change. That's why as fathers, our words, our belief in our children are planting seeds that will grow long after we are gone. It will grow beyond them leaving our house. Because think about it. When our children go outside of the house, what do they hear? It's all negative stuff outside in this world. They go to school, it's negative. They go to work, it's negative. They go to the park, you're just going to go and enjoy the peaceful time. And what happens at the park? It's all negative stuff. They hear destructive language and they hear destructive voices. And as fathers, our duty is to be the one who encourages them, not to tear them down. So the question is for us today, will your voice be louder than all the other voices that try to turn down your children? The second thing that Paul describes is comfort. For some men, comfort feels soft, right? Hey, we are raised to fix problems. We are raised to push through. We are raised to keep moving no matter what happens, right? We're raised to think logically, suppress our emotions, and to be a man, right? Hey, you have to tough it out. You're a man. Men don't cry. Men do this. Men don't comfort each other, right? But let's look at scriptures and what does it say about the father that we're looking to imitate. 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 and 4 says, "Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves we are comforted by God." Comfort is not weakness. It is in the very nature of God as a father. And if God is our model, then comfort belongs in our fatherhood too. Psalm 103 and 13, we read it for the children's story. As a father shows compassion to his children, so the Lord shows compassion to those who fear him. Compassion from a father, that's the biblical picture of fathers. You know, Jesus told a story about a father who had two sons. The youngest son did the unthinkable. He left home, he asked for his inheritance early, and he just wanted to go and wasted on everything that brought shame to his family. By every social standard of that day, the father had every right to close the door and never look back. But Luke 15:20 says something extraordinary. It says, "And he," and that is the prodigal son, "arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion. He ran and embraced him and kissed him." He ran. You know, in that culture, a man of dignity doesn't run. It was undignified for a man to run. But this father's dignity was put aside. Why? Because his child is coming home. He's coming broken, and he needed comfort. So comfort mattered more than dignity for that father. Comfort mattered more than public image for that father. Now that's the picture of a comforting father. It's not the man who waits for their children to earn their way back to him, but the man who runs towards them, especially when they are at their worst. I remember every time Samer does something wrong. Every time he looks me straight in the eye and do the opposite of what I just told him. My first instinct is just grab him, sit him down, and start lecturing him. What you did is wrong. This is what you need to do. I get the feeling that I need to correct, I need to fix, to make sure he understands the consequences. But every time I do that, it doesn't make things better. He doesn't listen, and it turns into a chasing game, where I'm just running after him, and he's running away, and he thinks I'm playing with him. However, when I grab him, hug him, and tell him, well, it's okay, the whole thing, the whole atmosphere changes. We'll be laughing instead of having tension. Because that hug, that embrace, reminds him that his father is there to help him through loving him. His father is there to comfort him and to remind him that there is no mistake big enough to keep him away from his dad. And to the fathers here today, the world is going to wound your children. That's not a maybe, that's a certainty. The world is going to wound our children. Friendships will fall apart. Hearts are going to be broken. Failures are going to come. But the question is, when that happens, will your children run to you or away from you? And the answer to that question is being built right now. In how you respond to them every time they spill their milk. How you respond to them when they do something at the house. They don't do their chores. They don't eat their food. All these little things that we do. How your face looks when they bring back a bad grade. Whether they have seen you sit with them in their pain without immediately trying to fix it. As Christians, we want to build homes where dad is safe. Our father is not going to shame me. My father is going to sit with me in this. And that is not weakness. That is the strength of a man who knows truly who he is. And that's what a father does. So father comforts. Number 3, and this is where it gets powerful. This is the part we want to get to as fathers. A father urges. Paul says, urging you to live lives worthy of God. Now, urging is different from encouraging and comforting. Why? Because encouraging lifts you up. Comforting catches you when you fall down. Now, urging is grabbing you by the shoulders and pointing you towards something bigger than yourself. It's the voice of a man with a conviction. A man who decided not just for himself, but also for his family. That's where we're going. We're going somewhere. There's a destination that we are going to. This is the standard in this house. We don't drift, we pursue. Deuteronomy 6 and 7 gives us a direct commission, especially for fathers, and says, and these words that I commanded you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in the house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. Now, I want you to notice when God says to do this, he says, you do it where? Sitting, walking, lying down, getting up. He didn't say on Sabbath morning. That's every day. Every day, we need to do these things to our children. Because think about it this way. Your faith is caught more than it is taught. Our children watch us and do exactly like us. They don't listen to what we say. They do what we do. And they do that in the ordinary moments of life. Proverbs 22:6 says, train up a child in the way he would go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now that's a generational promise. But here's the thing. I see parents looking at this verse and claim it as a promise in hopes of comforting themselves when their children do not follow God. Have you ever heard this before? When people use that, they'll come back, right? But this is sad. Why? Because it is sad to have the wrong idea and expect God to fulfill it for us. This verse doesn't give us the promise that if your child wanders, they will come back. Let's read it one more time. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. It doesn't say when he wanders, he'll come back. It says he's not going to depart from it. And I've heard people use this verse to comfort each other. Train up a child and they will come back. So what kind of theology we put in our minds? Proverbs gives us wisdom about how life generally works in God's created order. It's not a contract God signs with every parent. You know, if you take your child every Sabbath to church, then I'll guarantee you that they'll never go out of the church. God never says that. What God is saying is this: when you faithfully train your children in godly ways, that training gets imprinted, written into their mind, into who they are. It shapes their character. It influences their choices long after they leave your home. And if that child still chooses to go a different path, that's their choice. It's not your fault. It's not your fault. It's not you as parent that failed. No. That's why today, the urging that we do as fathers and as parents will always leave a mark that will last longer than we will. That's why we're called today to train them to follow up a life, a godly life, to follow God by our words, but also by our actions. You know, the Apostle Paul wrote to a young man named Timothy, who had become one of the most faithful leaders in the early church. And when Paul traced the roots of Timothy's faith, he pointed not to a dramatic conversion story. Timothy never was in bars drinking, and then one day Jesus appeared to him, and then he came to church. No, he grew up in a faithful home. It's his family. 2 Timothy 1:5 says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, a faith that dwelt first in your grandmother Louise and your mother Eunice, and now I am sure dwells in you as well. Chapter 3, verse 14 says, but as for you, continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learned it. Timothy's faith was built in a home when somebody was urging him towards God from infancy. Long before the days he stood behind a pulpit, long before anybody knew his name, he was being urged to follow God. As fathers, you may never preach a sermon, but you're preaching one every single day in your home. And the congregation of your home is watching every word you preach in your home. One of the greatest pioneers of the Adventist church, a man was named J.N. Andrews. He was the church's first official overseas missionary. Now, after his wife's death, Andrews became a single father while carrying enormous responsibilities for the church. He was still doing God's work, but he had 2 children. When he was called to serve in Switzerland in 1874, he didn't just leave his children with somebody and leave. He brought them with him into the mission field, intentionally involving them in God's work. His children grew up sharing their faith, their father's faith, their father's ministry. J.N. Andrews understood that his greatest legacy would not be the sermons he preached or even the books he wrote, but is the faith that he passed down to his children. And that's the calling of every father, not just merely to provide for their children, but to lead them toward Christ. A godly father's influence can reach far beyond his own lifetime. But here's the good news. You don't need to be J.N. Andrews yourself. All you need to do or to be is to be your children's father. You need to be present, intentional, and pointing them toward God. Because as fathers, we're not just raising children, we're raising disciples. And the finish line is not the diploma they get, is not the career they get, is not on their wedding day. The finish line is your child standing before God someday and knowing who He is because you showed them who they are. That's the greatest work of your life. That's the greatest work that we can do as fathers. 3 words, 3 responsibilities. Encourage, give them your voice. Comfort, give them your presence. And urge, give them your faith. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be a perfect father to do these 3 things. Because Paul, when he was describing the fatherly figure, he wasn't describing a superhero. He was describing a man that shows up, somebody who's present and intentional day after day. And I know some of you have been doing this for years. And maybe you're tired. God sees you. Keep going. Because your faithfulness is not invisible. God sees every early morning you wake up and every late night you go to bed. Some of you, just like me, we're just starting. And you feel you're completely unqualified. And that's a good thing. It means that you know that you need God. You can't do it on your own. We can't do it on our own. And that's the right place to start. Some of you might carry some wounds from your own father. Things that were never said, things that should never have been said. Today can be the day that this cycle changes. You get to decide what fatherhood is like in your family from here. You don't have to repeat the same mistakes of your father. That's why the greatest title you will ever hold is not on a business card. The greatest title is not on your LinkedIn profile. It lives in the hearts of your children. Now I want to close with this. One day, whether it's sooner or later, the titles of this world will not matter anymore. The big office that you used to go to is going to be empty. Trophies that you collected is going to collect dust. The applause that you used to get will be long gone. But the child that grew up knowing that their father believed in them, that child will still be standing. The child who ran to their father in their worst moment and found safety, that will be standing. The child who watched their father live with faith and integrity and said to themselves, I want to know the God that my father worships, that will be standing. Fathers, you're holding the greatest title. It's not because it's easy. It's but because nothing that you do in this life will matter more. Nothing. So I want to encourage you this week, find a moment to encourage. One moment to comfort. One moment to urge your children toward God. Just one of each. Just start there. Because the world will forget your title, but your children never will. Amen.